Hi guys, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Caleb.
This is Safety Pilot. Too many cameras to look at. Today we're going to show you a mock Private Pilot Checkride.
Yep.
I'm the DPE.
And I'll be the student pilot.
Both of us have passed multiple Checkrides, and while we are not DPEs, we still think there's something to be learned from watching a mock Checkride. So without further ado, let's jump into this Checkride. Alright, so welcome Caleb. This is your Private Pilot airplane Checkride. You have accomplished a lot to get here, and now is your chance to show me what a great pilot you are. You ready to do it?
I'm actually nervous. This is good.
This is good, yeah. Alright.
Just like normal.
So when you came here today, you brought me your airplane logbooks. I looked at those. Those looked really good. And you also filled out an IACRA application.
Yep.
And you had your instructor sign that.
Correct.
And then you reviewed that with your instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Yep. And I looked at that too, and it looks really good so far. So now that we have that paperwork out of the way, we're going to jump right into the test. Okay. So thank you for reaching out to me for your Private Pilot Checkride. I believe I am just as excited for you to pass as you are. I love my job. I love working with pilots, and I'm excited to see what you can show me. So there are 3 possible outcomes for our testing today. Either of us can decide that we want to postpone the test to a different time, and we'll discontinue. And if you would like to discontinue, you can just let me know at any time.
Okay.
Alternatively, you can demonstrate to me a mastery of all the subject areas, in which case you will be rewarded with a Private Pilot certificate, and that will be a pass. Or I will identify some areas that you need to work, maybe learn some more material and work more with your instructor, and then that'll give you an opportunity to come back once you've covered that material for a retest.
Okay.
All right? So those are your 3 outcomes. I'm going to be questioning you today based on my plan of action, which is taken from the ACS, which you've studied, and I've adapted those to make a scenario that's applicable to your situation and meets the criteria. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So do you have any questions about all that I've said before we jump into the test?
No.
All right. I will point out that we do have bathrooms over there. There's water. Feel free to get what you need and enjoy the test. All right. All right. So without further ado, your Private Pilot Checkride has begun. So we're going to be flying to you. You will be flying to Des Moines, from Superior, Wisconsin to Des Moines, and I asked you to kind of prepare that flight. Okay, so we're going to jump right into that scenario. Get in your mind. So you're flying to Des Moines, Iowa. Explain to me, what do you need to go flying today? Specifically, what do you need to carry on your person?
So as a private pilot, I need to be carrying my pilot certificate, a medical certificate, 1st, 2nd, or 3rd class, and I need to have a photo ID, so my driver's license, for example. Okay.
And with that photo ID, could you use a library card or something with your photo on it?
It needs to be government issued.
Okay, yeah. So as long as it's issued by the government, that'll work. All right, great. So when you've got your Private Pilot's certificate, can you list some of the privileges or limitations that would go with that certificate?
With a private pilot's license, I can fly day or night, and I can fly passengers. I'm not allowed to fly for hire, though.
Okay. So that would be one of the limitations.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other limitations you could list besides not flying for hire?
Well, I'm not allowed to fly certain types of aircraft until I get further endorsements or things like that. Okay. I also can't fly on instrument flight rules, okay. So I can't fly in clouds, IFR conditions, that kind of stuff.
Okay. We've talked about some limitations and privileges of your pilot certificate. I want to talk a little bit now on currency. So can you list some of the currency's requirements that you would have to fall under for a private pilot?
Sure. So in order to fly, exercise my privileges as a private pilot, act as a pilot in command, I need to have a flight review every 24 calendar months. I also need to have, if I want to carry passengers, I need to have, within the last 90 days, 3 landings.
Okay, and are those landings to a full stop, touch and goes?
They can be touch and go, stop and go, full stop.
Okay, yeah, so you just need touch and go. Now, what if you're flying at night?
If I'm flying at night and I want to carry passengers, those landings need to be to a full stop.
Okay, yep, so you mentioned in the last 90 days. you are taking a passenger to Des Moines.
Yep.
So for this flight, if you haven't flown in the last 85 days, are you going to take that passenger and fly with him to Des Moines? First off, will you be current in that flight?
I would. If within the last 90 days I had done full stop landing, 3 of them, then yes, I would be current. But I would say that I would not do the flight because I don't have a lot of flight time at night and not a lot of night landings in general. And even if I did 85 days...
Let's say if you're going in the day, though, not necessarily at night.
During the day. Mm-hmm. I would be... So I hadn't flown in 85 days.
Yep. It's just been 85 days. You're doing a typical day flight. You're leaving after...
I would probably go fly with CFI before I did it.
Okay.
If it's been close to 3 months without flying.
Okay. But you would still be current.
I would be current, but I'd be worried about proficiency.
Okay.
I'd be worried about...
That's what I wanted to hear.
I'd be worried about just... I mean, skill lapses over time. Flying an airplane isn't necessarily like riding a bike or flying a bike.
Yeah, right.
So
that's true.
So I would want to go up with somebody that's more experienced, either a more experienced pilot or somebody that's been flying recently, or probably with a CFI.
Okay. Yeah. So could you? So are there other areas you can identify what's the difference between currency and proficiency? So we talked about one is carrying passengers. Where else might it come into play?
Well, it could come into play in pretty much every area of flying. Cross-country flying, even doing laps in the pattern solo. All phases of flight, being safe versus being proficient comes into play.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you consider then proficiency versus currency, do you have a set of your own minimums to identify where you are current or you are legal, but we wouldn't necessarily consider it safe?
I do. Yeah. So I made my own personal minimums sheet.
Okay.
And it's right over there, and I have on it cloud ceilings minimums they're kind of less than the VFR requirement for what it has to be. Just what I'm feel comfortable with, things that I've flown in all these conditions before, and I know that I can handle them flying solo. And yeah.
So that's really good. I think it's great to have a personal minimums list, and you don't have to, right? You don't have to have it. You can fly with what the FAA gives, but it's definitely something good to have. So I'm glad to hear that you have that, and I think that's really good for your flying. So you mentioned as well, besides your pilot certificate, that you also need a medical. Can you tell me a little bit more about what types of medicals there are? What type do you have, and when would that expire?
So yeah, there are 3 classes of medical: first, second, and third class. I have a first class medical, but I have third class privileges because it's been more than 12 months since I got my first class medical.
Okay.
So after 12 months, it's still a first class, but now it has the privileges of a third class medical.
Okay. And when would those third class privileges lapse?
They would end after 48 calendar months from the step down. So 60 total calendar months, 5 years, is how long the medical lasts. 1 year as first class, 4 years as third class.
Okay. And what class do you need to exercise privileges of a private pilot?
Just third class.
Just third class. Okay. Could you do it with second or first class?
Yes.
Would that impose anything new onto you?
Nope. No change.
Sure. Okay. Just as long as it's current and you have a first, second, or third. All right. So let's dive more now into the airplane. What type of airplane are you flying with down to Des Moines?
It's a Cessna 172.
Okay. Is it all right? Perfect.
172R.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Is the airplane airworthy?
Yes.
Okay. So we have this idea. So what? How can you tell that it's airworthy? Maybe first, what is airworthiness?
Airworthiness means that it conforms to the FAA regulations. Its type certificate.
Okay. Conforms to its type certificate.
And then it's also safe for flight.
Yeah, it conforms to safety. Yeah, yep. So those are the 2 elements we talk about when we talk about airworthiness: conforms to type certificate and safety. And how can you tell, to the best of your ability, that it conforms to those 2 elements? What are you looking for when you're flying? Or before you fly?
For the safety part, I do a thorough pre-flight of the airplane.
Okay.
And walk around the airplane, check things like dents, look for things like dents, and check the oil and the fuel to make sure the airplane looks safe for flying. And then I also make sure that it has the proper maintenance done and logbook entry or maintenance log entries for the work that needs to be done.
Okay. All right. So before we jump into what documents exactly you're going to be looking for, who ultimately has the responsibility to make sure that an aircraft is in an airworthy condition?
The owner or operator of the aircraft.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. The owner or operator is ultimately responsible to keep their aircraft in an airworthy condition. So as a private pilot, you're going to your 172 to make this flight. What are you going to make sure is in that airplane before you make that flight?
An engine.
Sure. In terms of documents, yes.
A seat.
You're going to want some seats, yeah. We'll jump into equipment and everything later, yeah. But in terms of documentation, what do you want to see?
Documentation. I want to make sure that inside the airplane,
Yep, sure.
I want to make sure that it has an airworthiness certificate.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that it has a radio operating license if it's leaving the country. My airplane doesn't have that because it doesn't need it.
Sure. You're not leaving the country.
Yeah. I want to make sure that it has its aircraft registration. And I want to make sure that it has operating limits. So an aircraft flight manual / pilot's operating handbook.
Okay.
AFM, POH. And its original empty weight and balance information.
Okay. Great. Yeah, so when we go out to the airplane, you can just show me those documents so you know where they are.
Okay.
And but it sounds good to me. So when we also look at an airplane from the maintenance side, you mentioned, what inspections must be done on your airplane to make sure that it's VFR legal?
Well, it needs an annual inspection every 12 calendar months. It needs a 100-hour inspection if it's being operated for hire.
Okay.
It needs a VOR check only if you're using the VOR, so that'd be like for instrument. So if I'm not using the VOR, I don't need that. It needs an also the altimeter and pitot system needs to be checked, but that's also for IFR.
Okay.
So it doesn't need it, but it's good to have it.
Okay.
And then it needs its transponder checked, and it needs its ELT checked.
Okay. And what are your time limits there for getting the ELT checked in the transponder?
The ELT has 12 calendar months, and the transponder has 24 calendar months.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So you just want to make sure that those are all in order, and you know. Yeah, it sounds like you know your stuff there. Often when we talk about aircraft maintenance, we talk about things called airworthiness directives. Could you speak to me about what is an airworthiness directive, and where could you find if your airplane has one, or any of them?
So an airworthiness directive is a directive pertaining to airworthiness that is issued by the FAA about specific aircraft engines or propellers or components of an aircraft, kind of like a recall, saying things like it needs to be replaced, it needs to be looked at or inspected, or it needs to be repaired. And they are issued by the FAA. They go to owners. If I wanted to find one, I think if I own an airplane, they send it to me. But if I'm looking up specifically for a part of my airplane, or I'm looking at like my flight school airplane, I can go to the FAA's Dynamic Regulatory System, drs.faa.gov, and they have an airworthiness directives tab on the left, and I can scroll down and search by engine type or aircraft type and find a list. Yeah, good. It sounds like you know that. And so that's where you can find one. Now, if there is an AD for your airplane, do you have to comply with it? Yes. Yeah, so it's mandatory. Okay. Yep. So airworthiness directives are mandatory. But we also have something called SABES, a special airworthiness information bulletin. How does that relate to an AD, and how is it different? Those are similar to an airworthiness directive, but they're not mandatory. Okay. They're like recommendations. I think they're also done by the FAA, but they're advisories, notices. It may later turn into an airworthiness directive, but it's just like just so you know kind of thing. Okay. So what would you say the main difference is between AD and the SABE? Mandatory versus non-mandatory. Okay. Yeah, but they both pertain to maintenance that should be done on the airplane. Same things. Okay. Or inspections that should happen. All right. So speaking of maintenance now, let's say you're wanting to get your hands dirty. You got to do a little maintenance before the flight. You're doing your pre-flight inspection, and you realize one of the left main on your airplane is flat. Can you change that tire? Can I change the tire? I think I can. Okay. I would need to maybe look it up.
Okay, and where could you find information about what you can do as a private pilot?
So I think what you're talking about is the question is whether or not it's preventative maintenance.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I can find that in Part 43 of the FARs, and I think it's Part 43 Appendix A,
Okay.
like 43 Appendix A Section C, I think is where it's in.
Okay.
And I'm like 80% sure that I can replace a tire myself,
Okay.
but I'm not positive, so I would want to look it up.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's exactly what I want to hear. You have a good level of certainty, but before you would jump right into it, you're going to go look at it. And yeah, I'd go with FAR 43. Would be a perfect place to find preventative maintenance, and you may find a good list there of things you can and cannot do. So let's say you found something such as a dented aileron during your pre-flight. How would you respond to that? What would you do? You still want to make your flight, you have a dented aileron, what can you do?
I wouldn't fly.
Okay.
That would be the first thing. And I mean, I'm assuming this is a big enough dent that it would be noticeable and worrisome. I would report it to my flight school and make sure that the maintenance people know about it.
Okay.
And I wouldn't fly it.
Okay. Is there any way that you could move that airplane? Any way you can think of
to fly the airplane?
Yep. Legally, so if you've already just determined that it is in an unairworthy condition.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to move that airplane now without taking it apart and putting it on a truck? Is there a way to fly that airplane if you want to let's say just hopping over to the next airport as a maintenance hangar where they can do work on it? Is there a way you can get it over there?
I could apply for a ferry permit.
Yeah.
And then I could maybe fly it.
Yeah, so that you really want to be looking for a ferry permit, which would give instructions on how you could move that airplane. Yeah, that's perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. And yeah, definitely when you're dealing with primary flight controls ailerons, you want to be careful. So let's say now you got your tire changed, maintenance came out and they fixed the aileron problem. You're doing now an inspection inside the airplane and you realize your turn coordinator it's not working. Mm-hmm. How are you going to respond to this?
So I have to determine if I can still fly without a turn coordinator.
Okay.
And I'm using my old 8 Tomato Flames adage.
Okay, perfect.
And I don't think 8 Tomato Flames lists turn coordinator. So I think I can fly without it. Now my next thought is it safe to fly without it? It's legal, I think. To find out if it's safe, I need to think, can I fly without a turn coordinator? And as a newly certificated private pilot, I would probably stick to flying with all of my gauges working.
Okay.
Especially because if something's not working, there could be an underlying cause, and it could be an electrical issue. And my turn coordinator is electrically powered.
Okay.
And so even if I could fly with the turn coordinator, the underlying cause might cause other issues in flight, and I just don't want to deal with it. So I would choose not to fly.
Okay. All right. Perfect. It's a safe decision. You talked about their 8 Tomato Flames. Where could you find if you don't sound 100% sure if you can fly with or without a turn coordinator? Where could you go to,
look it up?
Yeah, to look it up to find out for sure.
So in the FARS 91205.
Okay.
Has that information for requirements for day and night VFR flight.
Okay.
So that would have the equipment requirements that I would look at.
Okay. So you've decided now that because of that turn coordinator not working, you're not going to fly. That sounds like a safe decision. Now, let's say, for example, you tell the maintenance personnel or you tell your flight school about it, about the turn coordinator not working, and the maintenance technician tells you, oh, why don't you just, here's a screwdriver, why don't you just take it out of the airplane, and just, take it out of the airplane. What is something that you want to be, would you take it out of the airplane? And what are some things you need to consider when removing equipment from the airplane?
So, a couple things come to mind.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to remove.
Okay, sure.
Equipment from the airplane. I don't feel comfortable, and I'm pretty sure. Again, I would check FAA Part 43, but I'm maybe 90% sure this time that I cannot remove the panel.
An avionics.
As a private pilot.
Yeah.
But if I could remove it from the airplane, or if I was removing something I could remove, I would need to make sure that I mark it as inoperative.
Okay.
And then it has to be put in the maintenance manual what was done. And it might even have a weight and balance change.
Sure, yeah.
So
Yep, so those are two things I really wanted to hear. Typically with inop, if you leave it in the airplane. And then weight and balance. If something's coming out of the airplane, you want to make sure the weight it wouldn't affect weight and balance in any way. Are you allowed to inop a piece of equipment that you've realized is not working? Yes or no?
If I as a private pilot am allowed to remove it or deactivate it, and can safely remove it, or can dictate that the airplane is still safe to fly, I think I can. But that is almost never the case. So it should generally be done by an approved mechanic.
Okay. Yeah.
And that would be, I would look it up because I am a bit shaky.
Sure.
91-213.
91-213. All right. Sounds like you know your FAR very well. And yeah, that's the perfect place to go to find answers. Yeah. As a private pilot, you should not be inoping equipment. Maintenance personnel should be doing it, and that's exactly what you said. Like, if you have a question about it, I'm having maintenance come in and handle it, not myself. Which is good. As a private pilot, you are not. That does not make you a mechanic.
If my flight school once told me that I could do it, is there a place I can report them to the FAA?
That's a different question altogether.
When I was a student pilot, they did.
All right, so we've looked at what you need to be carrying, and we've looked at what needs to be in the airplane, and just a more in-depth examination of the airplane. Before we met today, I asked you to plan a flight to Des Moines, Iowa. You're taking a passenger flying down there. You're flying down to pick up an Archer. Is that correct?
Yep.
You're going to buy that Archer. You're going to spend the weekend there, and then maybe on Monday or Tuesday, if the weather's good, you'll be flying back up the Archer back, and your friend will be flying as well. We're looking at your flight down to Des Moines, so we're going to jump into that right now. So if you want to open up, I believe you said you'll be using ForeFlight.
Yes.
To be showing this. We're going to start with weather. So go ahead if you need to show me any weather information on ForeFlight if you have it printed out. I want to start with, so you're looking at your pre-flight. Where are you going to get your weather information for this flight?
I'm going to get my weather information from ForeFlight. It gives me my weather information for me.
Okay.
It imports it from the National Weather Service.
Perfect. Yep. So you just want to make sure that what your source you're using is using the National Weather Service. Could I use weather I got from listening to the evening news?
It can be supplemental, but it can't be your primary weather.
Okay. Yep. So you always want to be taking from different sources and comparing stuff. Yep. Sounds good. Do you want to say something? Would you like to show me?
What would you like? Do you want me to show? I can show you what the briefing that I use. I can show you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, if you want to show me that, why don't we jump into your briefing? Your.
So I've got a route here. This is my VFR cross-country route. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to pull up my flights tab, and I'll go step by step through my briefing. So there's a briefing button with the green cloud.
Okay.
I'll start at the beginning. So this is where I get my air mets and my air mets. So these are all air met tangos for turbulence, and the turbulence high, so they don't really affect me. They're all starting at 18,000 feet or higher even. So there's no air mets to worry about. Here's my surface analysis chart, and we're up in the Superior, Wisconsin area up here, right where that lake is, and I can see that there's no high or low pressure system right on me, and the contour lines are not super close to me, so it's not necessarily going to be super windy, and there are no fronts. So those are all good things. I've got a list of METARs here, but I know that METARs are issued every hour, and we're not probably going to fly here for close to another hour, so these METARs are all going to be updated. But right now they're all green, and they're all showing VFR, and that's what I like to see. I can also look to make sure the winds are okay and the cloud ceilings are within my personal minimums.
Okay, great.
Then we have PIREPs, pilot reports, and so we can see.
How often are those issued?
PIREPs?
Yep.
PIREPs are issued by pilots flying, so they come randomly.
Okay.
And so I can see what altitude they were at, the aircraft type, the turbulence level, and then other remarks in this case.
And why might aircraft type be important?
It's important because the amount of turbulence felt by an airplane varies based on its weight, and the severity level is also kind of subjective.
Okay.
So moderate turbulence for Boeing 777 is probably incredibly severe for Cessna 172.
Okay, perfect.
And yeah. Now we have cloud coverage charts, and looking at the north central region we can see the cloud layers, and along our route through the eastern edge of Minnesota down into central Iowa, we're pretty good. Then we have...
Now is that giving you cloud heights MSL or AGL?
These are AGL clouds.
Okay.
Then we have winds, surface winds, and visibility charts, and we can take a look and we can click on them and zoom in and stuff. And so I can see that the winds are coming from the south.
Okay, and what do those little flags depict?
These bars?
Yep.
Well, they help me know which way the wind is pointing, so they're like arrows. And
sure.
the bars coming off are like the veins on the arrow. And then each small bar is 5 knots, and each big bar is 10 knots. And then the red is gusts.
Okay. So yeah, so those bars are just showing you the wind speed relative. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now I have TAFs, Terminal Aerodrome Forecast, and these are telling me what the weather's forecast to be. And so I can see that it looks like it's going to be all VFR for the coming hours. Then we have wind chart, and this is kind of like the surface winds, but it's showing me winds aloft at my planned altitude. And so I can see the winds are more from the west-northwest. Then there's a vertical cross-section and a winds aloft table. I can see where the winds are coming from and what the temperature is going to be and how strong the winds are.
Okay. Could you, looking at this winds aloft, could you tell me along your route, you can pick a point there, just let me see what you're pointing. And
I'll pick fools.
So let's say, what altitude are you planning to fly down to Des Moines at?
4,500.
Okay, 4,500. Could you tell me what the winds would be at 4,500 using this chart?
They would be 312 degrees at 9 knots.
312 degrees at 9 knots?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then we have NOTAMs. This is at the departure area. And then at the destination in Des Moines. Do you want me to say anything about NOTAMs?
Yeah, we'll get just on your route. Where would you get NOTAM information? Are you getting it all right from in here?
I'm getting it in here, and I fly with. While I'm flying, I get internet to my iPad, so it will update NOTAMs.
Okay. Why don't we just start with what is a NOTAM?
A NOTAM is a notice to air mission. They're information pertinent to aircraft that are flying. Things like closed runways or taxiways or obstructions or icy runway conditions, those kinds of things.
Okay.
Or if a VOR is out, or if it's only operational in one direction, they would also have a NOTAM for that maybe.
Well, let's say you're flying and you lose internet connection for whatever reason, and you're aware that there is a VOR, there is a NOTAM at the airport you're flying to, but you can't exactly remember maybe which runway is closed. Is there a way for you to get NOTAM information in the air without internet?
I can call flight service, a flight service station, and ask them about any NOTAMs.
Sure. Yep. Just get on the radio and call them.
Yep.
Okay. Is that all for your weather brief there?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can we go back to the METAR? Can you open up some METARs along your flight?
Yep.
Now, are these all... Yeah, so I'm just going to pick one of these here. I'll just go to the top one. And going over this METAR here for KCOQ. Can you just kind of walk me through here? How do you make sense of this METAR?
Sure. So it says METAR and then Kilo Charlie Oscar Quebec, That's the airport that the METAR is from. And then it has a date and a time. So 01 is the date. So it's April 1st today. And then it's at 20:55 Zulu. So that's coordinated universal time. Then it's auto. So it was automatically generated without any people modulating it or modifying it. Then we see the winds are from 130 degrees at 4 knots. Visibility is 10 statute miles. The sky is clear. The temperature is 0 degrees Celsius. The dew point is -19. The altimeter is 29907. And then RMK-A02 means that it is the METAR station type that can distinguish precipitation types.
Okay.
And then TSNO.
Would that be telling me that they don't have an opportunity, there's no equipment there to give you information about a certain type of meteorological phenomena?
Thunderstorms. They can't tell you about thunderstorms.
And maybe convective activity or something. Yeah, so that's good for the METAR. Can you open up a TAF now? We'll have to go through a TAF as well. And what did you say again? What's the main difference between a TAF and a METAR?
A METAR is current weather conditions or projected for the next hour, and a TAF is forecast for the next 24 or 30 hours.
Okay. And what's the range of a TAF around an airport?
I think 5 nautical miles around the center or where it's recording.
Do you have TAFs open here?
Yes.
You just why don't you show me a TAF for so this is here at the bottom we have KDSM, which is your arrival airport. So why don't you break down what's the arrival weather like and what's the time frame?
Okay, so the first thing is the date again. So April 1st at 17:22 Zulu. The next is its validity time. So the forecast was made at that 01/17/22, but it's valid from 18 Zulu until 18 Zulu the next day. So this is a 24-hour TAF. Okay. The winds are 320 degrees at 14 knots, gusting to 22 knots. The visibility is greater than 6 statute miles, and there are few clouds at 24,000 feet.
Okay. Yeah, that's good for the TAF. You can close it down. So after you've gone through your debrief or your brief here for the flight. Just looking at weather, what we looked at, what is your call? How are you feeling about this flight?
I would choose to go on the flight.
Okay.
It's the weather right now is within my personal minimums.
Okay.
I have VFR conditions for the whole flight, and I have there are no clouds at all, so I'm gonna stay VFR. So I think I can make it.
All right. What's maybe the biggest weather? What would you be thinking about or worried about the most in your flight?
The biggest thing for me is the winds towards the destination airport get kind of windy.
Okay.
So right now it's showing. Actually, no, it's not even windy. When I'm going to be arriving there, because I'm going to be arriving there around 7:30 to 8 p.m.
Okay, what are the winds around 7:30, 8 p.m.?
They're going to be, 21 Zulu is going to be -5, it's going to be 4 p.m. And then -4 is midnight, so -5 is 11 p.m. So it's going to be probably somewhere between 11 knots and 5 knots. So I'm not worried about wind.
Okay.
So I would say that there's nothing really concerning about this flight.
Okay.
Changing weather, maybe. I'm always worried, especially because this is a long flight. The weather could change.
Sure. Yeah, but it's good. You have a good brief there, and you've already talked about some ways that if you're in flight, you can get information from that flight service station. So that's good. Now, flying up here in Minnesota, you often have to deal with ice. Just a reality. If you are flying along and your airplane starts to develop ice, what are some of the symptoms you start feeling?
Well, my airplane will get heavier if it has ice, and it will not produce as much lift.
Okay.
And so I will maybe not be able to climb as much, and so I might notice that I'm not able to climb as fast or at all if I try to climb. And I might also get carburetor. Actually, my airplane doesn't have a carburetor, but if I was flying with the carburetor, I might get carburetor icing, and I would notice a decrease in RPM.
Okay.
I might also see ice building up. That wouldn't be necessarily a symptom, but it would be a symptom, but it wouldn't be an effect I would notice. But I would see ice maybe building up somewhere on the airplane.
And where might you expect ice to develop first on your airplane?
It usually builds up on small, thin, protruding parts. So, like the outside air temperature probe, something.
Okay, sure, yeah, small areas, small surface area. What types of ices might you expect could form on your airplane?
There are 3 types of ice: rime ice, clear ice, and mixed ice.
Okay.
And any of them could form on my airplane.
Okay, yeah. So we have 3 different types. What's the main difference between rime and clear ice?
Clear ice is, it freezes in sheets across the airplane, and it's harder to detect, and it's formed, I think, by large water droplets that spread out before freezing. I think maybe they're a little bit warmer. And rime ice is smaller droplets, and they freeze immediately on impact, and they kind of form like a milky, bubbled, kind of rough surface. They're easier to see, and so you might be able to detect icing sooner if you have rime ice than if you had clear ice.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So that's when we get into like the super cooled water droplets that just freeze immediately and are kind of milky in substance. Where can I find, so if I'm planning my flight, where can I find information about icing?
So I can use my winds aloft chart. That will tell me what the expected temperature is going to be along the route. Okay. And I know that if the temperature is maybe plus 10 to minus 10 or minus 15 Celsius, there could be a chance of icing. And I can also look at the, there's something called the probability index or something, like the KIP and the PIP. I would go to aviationweather.gov. Okay. And they have they have 2 types of icing forecasts. There's a probability icing forecast and a severity icing forecast. Yeah. So PIF and SIF, I don't know. Yeah, sure,
that's what I hear. So they have probability and they have
severity.
Yeah, and you can find those on aviationweather.gov. Sure. Are there any specific warnings for icing?
Oh, if identified? So if there's ice, if there are suspected icing conditions, they will probably issue an AirMet Zulu for icing. Okay. And that would be something that I would avoid as a VFR pilot and with a plane that's not supposed to go into ice.
Okay. So is that your personal decision, or are you allowed to fly into known icing conditions?
I'm not allowed to fly into known icing conditions.
Okay. Is that based on your airplane or based on your being a private pilot?
Well, it's kind of both. Okay. My airplane is not certified for flight into known icing conditions. I'm also not certified for flying into clouds.
Sure.
So, which is a primary cause of icing.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So what typically is needed for ice to form?
You need to have visible moisture and a below freezing surface.
Yeah. Yeah, and when we talk about visible moisture, usually it's inhibiting your visibility. So it might not necessarily mean you're below VFR minimums if it's something like cold rain or something, but usually it does. So let's talk about now humidity. Living around here, the big Lake Superior, humidity is something we deal with in the summer. We talk about relative humidity. What does relative humidity mean?
Relative humidity is how much moisture is in the air versus kind of as a ratio to how much moisture could be in the air.
Could be in there. Yeah,
for given temperature.
Sure. How does humidity affect flight? If I for example, we have really high relative humidity today, what may I experience during my flight?
Humidity, so wet air is less dense than dry air. So if there's a lot of humidity, it's going to be less, the air will be less dense, which means that my airplane will have worse performance.
Okay. So just lesser performance?
Yeah, less performance.
Okay. All right, perfect. So you've got your weather for your flight, and again, if you need to get weather in flight, you've said you'd use your iPad with connected to the internet. That's working. And how does your iPad get that information?
Get the weather?
Yep.
The National Weather Service.
Okay, it gets it from the weather service. But I mean more like technically speaking. Are you just using the internet? Is it connected to the internet?
Yeah, it comes through the internet.
Okay. And if that were to fail, you could.
If that were to fail, I would not be able to use weather on my iPad.
Mm-hmm.
I would have the most recent data because it downloads it. Especially if I pack my flight, it will give me the most recent data. But moving forward, I would not have it on my iPad, so I would have to rely on in-air means of collecting weather information.
Okay. And could you give me just one example?
ACS.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. All right, so we're gonna jump now into your flight path. So you can open up a sectional there if you have it. And I want you just to open up your sectional there, and I want to know, why did you pick the specific route you did? Is it just the most direct, or what were we thinking about when you picked the specific route?
Okay, so I have it pulled up. So I've pulled up my route here. Our flight is going from Superior, Richard I. Bong Airport, down to Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay.
And I picked a route based on visual references, obstacle avoidance, and emergency options for diversion or emergency landing.
Okay.
And also one that was relatively straight. I also maneuvered around the class Bravo.
Okay. What would you need if you were going to fly through that Bravo in terms of equipment and radio communications?
So in order for me to enter the Bravo, I would need to communicate with them.
Okay.
And they would have to give me clearance with my N number for me to enter.
Okay.
I would therefore need two-way radio communication, so two-way radio comms, and I would need a Mode C transponder, and I would need ADSB out.
Okay, perfect. All right, but you've chosen to avoid the Bravo, which I think is a fair decision.
Yep.
Along this route, what would be your minimum safe en route altitude? So you said you've chosen 4,500. How low could you go?
Well, it would depend on where I am on the route.
Okay, yeah, just looking at the whole route in general. So pick your highest
MEF
obstacle.
It looks like I would want to be probably above 3,000.
Okay.
I don't know. So I'm seeing some big blue numbers on the side, minimum elevation figures, which are telling me the height of the highest obstacle. And so in this quadrant here, it's 3,000. I don't know if that obstacle is anywhere near my route. It could be to the right of that number. But just to be safe, I would want to stay above any minimum elevation figure that I see.
Okay.
And 3,000 is the highest I see.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. Now, looking at your route there, do you have any intermediate stops where you'll be stopping for fuel or any other reason?
Nope.
All right, so you'll be flying.
I can make it all in one flight.
Okay, direct. And how much fuel do you have for this flight?
I'm filling up with 53 gallons.
Okay. And how many hours will that give you a flight?
I didn't calculate that. Do you want me to calculate that now?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, so I know I have 53 gallons, and I burn on average 9 gallons per hour.
Okay.
I rounded that up from the POH performance. So I can just take my 53 gallons and divide it by 9, and that's just under 6.
Okay.
So I'd maybe say 5.5 hours. Now, that is like all the way to starvation of my engine, so I would never fly that long. I would have to plan it out so that I have at least 30 minutes of reserve fuel for wherever I'm planning on landing for the FAA.
Yeah, so that's an FAA requirement. That's not your personal.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So you want to have at least 30 minutes left when you get to your arrival destination, and you said you're flying with 53 gallons. You should have about maybe 5.5 hours.
Yep.
And then plus 30 minutes for the reserve, so maybe you have 5 hours of cruising. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And how long are you estimating this flight to take?
2 hours and 48 minutes.
Okay. Yep. So it looks like you should have enough fuel there, even for.
Yeah. And my personal minimum is 1 hour, day or night reserve.
Okay.
So I want to make sure I always. So in this case, I want at least 9 extra gallons.
Okay.
I have enough.
Perfect. So speaking then just of fuel, you seem to have quite a bit of fuel there. As you're approaching Des Moines, you realize the clouds are lower than they should be, than what you were planning for them to be. And you get on with Flight Service Station. Looking there in the Des Moines area, what frequency could you reach the Flight Service Station at?
If I'm right around Des Moines, I can reach flight service on 122.5 degrees. It's like Fort Dodge.
Okay. Yep, so it's through the RCO there. And they tell you that looking down to the southwest, down by Rosecrans Memorial, it's KSTJ. There are VFR conditions. It's a bit farther down.
VFR conditions?
Yep, those are your nearest VFR conditions down to the south. Given your fuel conditions, do you think you can make it down there?
You let me plan it for a second?
Yep, sure. Do your calculations there and see what the distance is.
So if I flew direct, and I think I can, down to KSTJ, Sierra Tango Juliet, it would add on an extra, I think, 10 gallons of fuel, and it would make it kind of a long flight, but I would be within my minimum. I would have enough fuel to make it, yes.
Do you have the distance there? What would be the distance?
The distance would be 422 miles.
That's from...
That's the whole distance.
What would be your distance? So how much fuel would you calculate that you would have left when you're at Des Moines?
How much would I have left?
Yeah.
20. So I'm going to use 26. I'm going to round up and say, let me just take this out and see what it says. It's going to use, we'll say 27 gallons to get to Des Moines.
Okay. And you started with, was it 52 or 53?
53.
53.
53 usable, 56 total.
Okay.
So 53 usable and we're using 27. So we've got 26 left. And then 26 left. It would be an extra 9 gallons of fuel to get to Kilo Sierra Tango Juliet. So
and would that still...
So I have 17 gallons left.
Okay.
And I need 9 for my 1 hour.
Okay, so you'd still have enough for your 1 hour, so you could make it there.
Yes.
Okay.
Could make it.
Yeah, perfect.
I don't know if I would. I would have to, wouldn't I? But it's a really long flight.
Sure. Yeah, it would be much farther. But then again, if you do have low clouds all in that area to the east and to the west, sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do.
Right.
Yep. So just making sure that in the moment in the flight, you might have to do those calculations. So knowing by the time I get to Des Moines how much fuel I'm going to have left will allow me then to make those decisions. I'm already tired after a couple hours of flying, and I might need to do some calculations there. So having those numbers written down and knowing for every leg of the flight, it's a good practice. So we talked about your fuel requirements. We talked about how much you're going to bring. We talked about changing your flight plan while you're flying. Would you file a flight plan for a flight like this? Would you personally?
Yes.
Okay. Are you required to?
No.
When would you be required to file a flight plan? A VFR flight plan.
I think the only reason you have to do it is if you're leaving the country.
Yeah.
Crossing the ADIS.
Okay. Yep. So you don't have to. So why would you file a flight plan for this?
So that if anything goes wrong, they look for me.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
All right. And how would you go about filing that flight plan?
Do you mind if I take a bathroom break?
Sure. Absolutely.
Speaking of taking breaks during check rides, I once had a check ride where I took I got all the way through the oral to the last question. Did I already tell you this? And I got a bloody nose.
Oh, yeah.
Right before the last question. I was in the bathroom for like 10, 15 minutes, and then I got out of the bathroom, went back into the room. He asked me one question. He's like, all right, you're done. You passed.
I had a check ride where the DP took a break to let his dog out of his car. He had his dog in his car the entire time, and he went to let his dog out for a bathroom break. during an oral. I'm glad he did.
Which just goes to show that you can take a break at any time for any reason. For any reason at all. All right.
It was a nice dog.
Do you want me to? So you asked me how I'm going to get my VFR flight plan.
Yeah. So what are some options for you? So we're continuing now. What are some options you have to file a VFR flight plan?
So you asked me that question. I didn't know the answer, so I asked to use the bathroom. I Googled it. No, I'm kidding. So the reason the method I'm most comfortable with is calling 1-800-WX-BRIEF.
Okay.
And giving them information and asking them.
It's primitive.
It's the way I learned.
That's the way I do it too.
I can also do it on ForeFlight.
Okay.
I can do VFR and IFR flight plans.
Yep.
And then I could also I think I can also file one in the air with flight service.
Sure.
But I've never done that.
Yeah. But better to do it on the ground when you're thinking more clearly and just have it out of the way. Yep. Sounds good. That's all I wanted to hear for that. So we're going to be looking back at your sectional now, and I want you to find Ames, Iowa, KAMW, just north of Des Moines.
Okay, looking for Ames. Okay, found
All right,
Ames.
so I see some symbols here that I just kind of want you to walk me through here, help me to understand them. Looking at Ames itself, there is a magenta dotted line surrounding the airport. What can you tell me about that magenta dotted line?
That magenta dotted line tells me that within that space, it is echo airspace to the surface.
Okay, and what would be the height of that echo airspace?
That echo airspace goes up all the way to 18,000 feet, I think.
Does echo airspace generally go to 18,000 feet?
Yes.
Yep. Is it including 18,000?
I believe no. I believe it's 17,999.
That sounds right. And then we have this faded line surrounding the dotted line. What can you tell me about that line?
That is telling me that it's Class Echo up to 700 feet. Sorry, Class Echo begins at 700 feet.
Okay. And what's below that echo?
Class Golf.
And what's above the echo?
Above the echo is Class Alpha.
Class Alpha. Again, at 18,000.
18,000. Yep.
Yep, perfect. All right, what is if I want to get weather information as I'm flying into Ames, what am I tuning to?
I'm going to turn to the ASOS, which is 132.025.
Good. Tell me what else am I reading here? Can you walk me through? So I saw you there point to this little block here for Ames. Walk me through that. So we went to the ASOS, that's my weather. What's that 955 or 956?
That 956 is the station elevation, or is the airport elevation.
Can just follow through. So
okay.
The L.
So that capital L means that it has lighting, and the star means that it is has restrictions, so pilot controlled.
Okay.
Generally. 57 is the length of the longest runway in hundreds of feet, so it's 5,700 feet.
Okay.
122.7 is the control traffic advisory frequency. That's how you're going to communicate with other aircraft. Then RP means right pattern, and right pattern is for runway 1 and 13.
Okay, perfect. I see a little airplane with a G above it. What is that telling me?
That means that there is glider traffic in the area.
Okay, where can I find more information about that glider traffic?
In the legend area of the chart. It's got extra information about special areas.
Okay. Now I'm seeing some towers around. So let me just point out one here right beneath the words Nevada, where it says 1471. What is that telling me, and then what are those numbers in the parentheses below it?
1471 is telling me the elevation of the tower in MSL, and the parentheses number is, so 490 is above ground level.
Okay. All right, and that's pertaining there to our towers. We have several different types of towers there. If you look up to above here where it says 1470, we have a tower with some lightning bolts coming out of it. What does that tell us about the tower?
That means it's lit. It has lighting.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So now coming into Des Moines, tell me about what you need to fly into Des Moines. What type of airspace is it, and what does that require of you?
Des Moines is let me turn this off. Des Moines is a Class Charlie airspace, Class C. So I'm going to need to have two-way radio communication in order to enter their airspace. I don't need clearance like I needed for Bravo, but I need to talk to them.
Okay.
And I can see up here that I need to contact Des Moines Approach within 20 nautical miles on 123.9 in order to come in and land here.
Okay. So looking at that Charlie airspace with the inner circle, what is the base and the ceiling of that inner circle?
Okay, so I see this symbol here, and this is telling me that the Class Charlie goes from the surface up to 5,000.
Okay, and what about that outer ring?
The outer ring goes from 2,200 up to 5,000 feet.
So right by where we get that 50 over 22, there's a little blue hexagon. What is that hexagon?
Where is it again? Oh, that is a navigational aid, a VOR.
Okay.
I think it's a VORTAC.
Sure. Yep. So it's a radio aid for navigation. And if you wanted to use that for navigation, what would you have to do?
I would need to tune my navcom to its frequency.
And where can you find that frequency?
That frequency is right here. It's the Des Moines one.
Okay.
So 117.5 is the VOR frequency.
Sure. Great. And are you planning to use that today for your flight?
No. I don't think so.
All right. So one more thing I see here is a little flag if you look above
Sailorville Dam.
Yep, that's correct. What would that flag mean?
That's a VFR waypoint, and I am planning on using that.
Okay.
So I can call into ATC and tell them that I am above it or near it, and they'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, perfect. So you're going to use that. And why would you use that?
Just so they know where I am, and so I know where I am.
Okay.
And instead of saying some random other point on the map.
Sure. All right. So as I'm flying out here in Echo airspace, what would be my cloud requirements for VFR?
How high am I?
4,500.
I need to be 3 statute miles of visibility, 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, and 2,000 feet laterally from any cloud.
Okay, good. And how would that change if I were to go to Gulf airspace?
At 4,500 still?
Nope, if I were to descend down.
Well, I think if I'm below 1,200, if I'm below 1,200 in Gulf, I have 1 statute mile clear of clouds.
Okay.
Yep. Above 1,200, I have 1 statute mile, and then 500 below, 1,000 above, 2,000 laterally.
If you're in Gulf?
Yes, I'm in Gulf.
At 4,500?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What can you tell me about special use airspace? Is there any special use airspace along your route?
No, I think no. I didn't notice any.
So if we look north of Superior,
yes,
out over the lake there, you have Snoopy West MOA. What is that?
That is a military operation area. There's military traffic, and they want to separate it from IFR airplanes.
Okay. So could you fly there?
Yes, I could, but when they're active, it's not a good idea. They're supposed to see and avoid me, but it's best not to chance it.
How could you find out if that MOA is active?
I think usually MOAs will have a NOTAM saying they're active.
Sure.
I could also call a flight service station. There's also usually a contact number. So I can contact Minneapolis Air Route Traffic Control at 127.9 when I'm in the area and ask if it's open.
Okay. Yep. So just if you have a doubt and you're flying through the area, best to find out if they're operating or not, and that can be done through NOTAMs or through contacting an agency with responsibility or with authority over the area. All right, so thank you. Like we've looked at your sectional. It looks good. I like your route. The weather does look really good. I'm sure you'll have a great flight, and yeah, just put into practice the things you've been telling me about, just making good decisions and being proficient. Before you make your flight, you want to make sure you have your weight and balance done. So have you done your weight and balance for today's flight?
Yes.
All right, can you please show me that? So for this flight, I remember you are flying, and then you're taking one passenger as well with you.
Yes.
So you've opened up your weight and balance
here. Yep, so I can see up in the top left, my front seat, I have me and a co-pilot, both weighing 170 pounds. We have a 53-gallon tank, and we're going to be burning 1.1 gallons on the ground, 35 in the air. That 35 is now adding the... I didn't originally plan for that. That's adding your extra stop you had me add. And... Actually, no, that's not what that's doing. That's adding in the 1 hour reserve that I had.
Okay.
Then I put 5 pounds in the back because I usually throw like my bag in the back. And I got a bunch of stuff in there. And then the baggage area's got chocks and cowl cover and some other stuff. So there's some weight back there. And so I can see that I am in my weight and CG balance. So I'm right in the middle, and I have the circle is the takeoff and the blue is the landing.
Okay.
Perfect. I'm in range.
So how would that change if you've been flying, you land, let's say you make a stop along your way to Des Moines, and you've burnt 10 gallons of gas. And at the stop, you also pick up a friend who weighs 230 pounds and you put him in the back seat. Would you still be in range there? Would you still be within your CG range?
So I burn my 27 gallons and I pick up a passenger.
You've burned 10 gallons of gas.
Okay.
And you pick up a 230-pound passenger and put them in the back seat.
230?
That's correct.
Okay.
So are you still within CG? Are you over gross weight?
Let me calculate it. So I'm going to have now 43 gallons. And I'm going to have a passenger who weighs 230 pounds.
Now, for your fuel there, I believe you mentioned that you had 53 usable. Is that correct?
Correct.
So how much is that? Are you putting in the weight for the usable or for the total fuel?
This is usable.
Okay. And when you do your weight and balance calculation, should you use the weight of usable fuel or total fuel?
I should use usable fuel.
Okay. And where is that unusable fuel factored in?
That is factored in the basic empty weight.
Yep. So typically it is. That's one thing to double check if you aren't sure. Typically now oil and unusable fuel is factored in with the empty weight of the airplane. All right. So it looks like you're overweight there.
Yes.
What could you do to would you go flying if you're overweight?
No.
Why wouldn't you go flying?
Well, the aircraft needs to be within. I need to follow the operating limitations,
Sure.
The AFM, and this is part of that. And so I would not do anything that doesn't fit my weight and balance.
Okay. How could you get back in weight and balance? What would you?
Well, my balance looks fine, but my weight looks high.
Sure.
So I would have to take off weight. So if my passengers really need to get there, I would probably decrease fuel.
Okay.
And then I could take intermediate stops on my way back.
Sure.
Or wherever I'm going.
How much overweight are you?
I am 117.4 pounds over.
Okay. So let's say your first passenger who's up front decides, you know what, I'm gonna stay here, and you guys can go on. So why don't you remove that front passenger in the front? And how does that affect your weight and balance?
So I'm now within balance.
Okay.
My center of gravity moved a little bit farther aft.
Okay. So when your center of gravity moves farther aft, how do you expect that to affect your flight characteristics?
Well, I'm going to become faster. I'll have a faster true airspeed. I will have less wing loading on the airplane, so I'll be more efficient. The aircraft will be less controllable, and should I stall, the stall recovery would be not as easy as a nose heavy airplane.
All right, good. So you mentioned an interesting thing with wing loading. You can use whether you want to use this airplane or not.
Am I done with weight and balance?
Yeah, you can kind of push it off to the side. We're still going to be talking about weight and balance here, but just using a tool here. I want you to talk to me about how is wing loading affected by CG, specifically more aft CG.
Okay, so looking at my airplane, I know that the center of gravity for a general aviation airplane, a Cessna to be even more specific, is always located ahead of something called the center of pressure.
Okay.
Or center of lift. That center of lift is somewhere along the wing. So there's basically lift or force going up there, and there's downward force here. So that would cause the airplane to spin forward. But there's also tail down force from the horizontal stabilizer. So I know there's a down force here, and an up force in between them.
Okay.
And I know that if I move my center of gravity farther forward, the torque that it has is higher because it's farther away from the center of gravity. So because there's more down force, or there's maybe not more force, but the torque is higher, there needs to be more downward torque here. So in effect, there's more downward force here, so there's more downward force here. So the up force has to cancel it out. So that's higher.
Okay.
So I would call it, so that's more wing loading. There needs to be more upward force on the wings.
Is there more wing loading as well on the horizontal stabilizer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, more downward.
And that's with forward or aft CG?
That's with forward. The farther forward I go with my center of gravity, the more weight is pushing down, and the more up my wings have to push.
Okay, and you mentioned as well that having that aft CG makes you faster. So how would this forward CG you're talking about right now, how would that make you slower?
That would make me slower because I know that in order to get more, so if there's more down force, in order to have more up force, I have to increase my angle of attack.
Okay.
Which increases lift. So I need increased lift by increasing the angle of attack like this, and now I'm flying like this, and I'm flying straight and level like this. Or to be really extreme, I'm not actually going to look like this, but I'm basically flying higher pitch up in order to fly straight and level. That more lift that's required also means more induced drag. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be moving slower through the air.
Perfect. Yep. So then, and just kind of wrapping that up, so it's more induced drag. So what happens then when your CG is more aft?
It's the opposite. So I have less loading on my back, so less wing. The wings don't have to lift as much, so I can have a lower angle of attack, and I can fly more with less drag through the air.
Okay.
So faster.
Perfect. All right. Just going into more kind of breaking apart this airplane. What are your primary controls on that airplane?
My primary controls are my ailerons, my rudder, and my elevator.
Okay. Could you list any secondary controls?
I have flaps.
Sure.
And I have a trim tab. And I also have a permanently set, ground adjustable trim tab.
Yep.
On my rudder.
Okay. What about the fuel system of your airplane? Where's the fuel stored? How does it get to the engine?
So I have a wet wing system. So the fuel is in the wings.
Okay.
And it flows from the wings down through some different filters and a reservoir down into the fuel injection system. I have a fuel injected engine, not a carbureted engine. So it flows down into something called the fuel air control unit, and then gets mixed with air there, and then injected through injectors into the cylinder.
Okay, perfect. And then do you have a way if you need to stop fuel from getting to that control unit? Is there a way for you to automatically shut off fuel?
Yeah, I have a fuel shut-off valve in the cockpit.
Okay.
Down by the tank control.
Okay. All right. And what kind of fuel is this airplane running on?
100 low lead.
Okay. And what is the engine make and model?
It is a Lycoming IO 360 L2A.
Okay. And how many horsepower?
160 horsepower.
160 horsepower.
Yep.
And you said it was an IO 360 engine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You think it's 320?
This is your Checkride. Remember, the horsepower's general rule of thumb is half of displacement.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I could be surprised here. All right, so sure, we'll move on. We talked about your fuel system. I want to touch more a little bit more electronics, especially since we started off talking about that turn coordinator. Is there any protection for your electronic components?
I mean, physical or like... I have circuit breakers in my airplane.
Oh, okay, circuit breakers. All right, so you have circuit breakers, and what's the job of a circuit breaker?
If there's an overcurrent situation or something, they will pop and disconnect so that high current doesn't hit the components.
Okay, so let's say you're flying along, and you're flying in maybe some cooler conditions, maybe some moisture, maybe it's raining, so you have pitot heat on. Your pitot heat circuit breaker pops. What are you going to do?
Well, I can look out the window and see if my pitot tube is looks like it's still there and working.
Sure.
Then I'll push it in one time, and then if it pops again, I'm not gonna push it in again.
Okay.
I'll reset one time. Then I will assume that there's something wrong with the pitot tube.
Okay. And would that be an emergency for you?
I would land.
Okay, you would
because
land.
my fuel is in my wings, and those are electrical cables going through my wing.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not be. I mean, I'm probably not using pitot heat as a VFR pilot, but just knowing that there could be some kind of electrical short or issue inside my wing when I've got hundreds of pounds of fuel, I'm going to treat it like it could be serious.
Okay. And what would you do if you had a wing fire on the left wing, for example? What would you do?
I would take my airplane and I would enter a right bank to get the fire going up so that it's not going down towards the wing tank, which is near the root of the wing. And I would do an emergency descent. Okay. So I would enter probably forward slip and do a turn.
And what are the purposes of that descent?
To get to the ground as soon as possible and to get air flowing over the fire and maybe put it out.
Okay. Yeah.
But
what about smoke? What would that do to the smoke?
Well, I'd push it back and away behind me.
Sure, push it away from the cockpit. Yep. So that's also something important. Okay, so speaking of that pitot tube, if the pitot drain in your airplane were to become clogged, what would you expect the instruments to show?
The back drain port.
You can kind of think about this. I know sometimes this can be hard to kind of answer right on the spot.
Well, I know if the front is blocked, it goes to 0. If both the front and the back are blocked, it goes to basically like an altimeter. And I think if the back is blocked on the pitot, you wouldn't get any indication.
Why is that?
I'm just thinking it comes in the front and goes through into the system.
You said you wouldn't get any indication?
No, I wouldn't change indication.
Oh, okay.
I'm just thinking it goes in the front and then...
And what would happen if just the front was clogged?
It would go to 0.
What would go to 0?
Your airspeed would go to 0.
Okay, and why is that? How does that airspeed indicator work?
The airspeed indicator works from ram pressure, air coming in, going into the pitot tube, through lines to the airspeed indicator, and then static air also goes in on the static port, and then the difference in pressure between the two is read as airspeed. Mm-hmm. And if the front is clogged, your pitot would read 0.
Okay. Yeah, but if that front was unclogged and just the drain was blocked, you'd still be getting that ram pressure.
Yeah.
Would you still be getting static pressure?
I think so.
Or where would you be getting your static pressure?
Static pressure comes on my airplane, it's on the left front side of the cowler.
Sure. So it's a completely different port.
Yeah.
Yep. So what is the job of the drain for the pitot tube?
It's to let condensation and stuff come out of the pitot tube.
Yep. So maybe just in the future it might get clogged even more. It might clog the front portion of the tube, but in general it shouldn't necessarily affect the work of the pitot tube immediately. All right. Great. So you're flying to Des Moines. We're almost done. I was gonna say great job. Just a couple more questions here, and I think you got it. So after takeoff, you've been flying for about 20 minutes. It's getting kind of cold. You pull carb heat on. After another 20 minutes, you start getting a slight headache. Speak to me from an aeromedical standpoint. What could that be a symptom of?
Well, I think you said carb heat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sorry, cabin heat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That would probably be hypoxia.
Okay.
From carbon monoxide poisoning. Because in my airplane, the heater gets its air from outside, and then it passes it over a heating shroud, which basically just uses hot exhaust air as it's leaving the air before it leaves the airplane. And if there's a crack in my exhaust, then carbon monoxide, which comes from incomplete combustion of the 100 low lead, will mix with the air and come into the cockpit. Okay. And it will bind with the hemoglobin in my blood way better than oxygen does. And so now I'm dealing with oxygen starvation, which is called hypoxia. Okay. So if you're in your flight there and you have suspicion that there may be carbon monoxide in the airplane, first off, do you have any ways of confirming or testing the levels of carbon monoxide? Second of all,
if you do or don't, what's your plan of action when you suspect that there is carbon monoxide?
I have a carbon monoxide detector in my airplane. It's a little disc that changes color from like yellow to darkest brown, I think, when it senses carbon monoxide. I also have a Sentry that has a carbon monoxide detector, but I've never tested it. Okay. But if I suspect carbon monoxide, I will flush out the cabin with air and turn off the carb heat first. Sorry, the cabin heat. Mm-hmm. Turn off the cabin heat, flush the air to get the carbon monoxide out of the airplane, and descend as soon as possible and land.
Yeah, so what are some ways to get air into the cockpit quickly?
I can open all the air vents, and I can descend.
Okay. Could you open your window?
I could open my window. Okay. Yeah.
Sure. Yep. Is there a maximum speed that you would want?
There is in the POH, but in my airplane it's the same as the never exceeds speed.
VNE. Okay. All right. So you're flying with your passenger, and you know that they've had a cold recently, and they start telling you, "Man, my ears are hurting," during the flight, but their ears weren't hurting before they started the flight. What would you think is happening inside their ear? What are they experiencing?
So they're probably having some, maybe not ear block, but ear block type symptom. So that would be the inner ear has something called the eustachian tube, and air inside that needs to equalize with air outside that. And when you change air pressure really rapidly, sometimes the pressure inside your ear and outside your ear, the pressure inside your ear can't stabilize quickly with the outside.
Okay.
So, and especially if they're having some kind of sickness, it can make it even more difficult for it to equalize. It constricts it, and so that would cause them pain. So I would, if I ever am feeling sick or have sinus problem, because I can also get sinus issues in my maxillary sinuses or up here, whatever these are called. And so if I ever have sinus issues or a cold, I will choose not to fly, and I will do the same. I always let my passengers know that you're not going to want to fly because it's going to hurt.
Is there anything you can do during flight to alleviate or try to help alleviate the pain?
Well, it's worse during a descent because the pressure has to push out against the eustachian tube. Maybe let me think. So it's pressure coming down to more pressure. I think pressure needs to come in. And it's difficult for the eustachian tube to go that way. Okay. So if you're descending, people's ears start hurting, you climb back up to the altitude you were at, and then slowly descend, maybe even just 100 or 200 feet per minute.
Okay.
To help the passengers. But in general, I choose to I try to never really descend more than 500 feet per minute at all.
Sure.
Just in case that kind of stuff happens. There's also, you can do like yawning, chewing gum, talking, doing like the thing where you like plug your nose and blow out, which can help equalize the pressure. Those are all things that help.
Okay. All right, good. So you're not feeling sick today. I'm not feeling sick today. That shouldn't happen on our flight. So we're about to go out to fly now. Explain to me, how would you determine for yourself that you are ready to fly?
Well, I would make sure that. Well, I use something called the I'm Safe checklist.
Okay. Why don't you walk me through that?
So I make sure that I don't have any illness.
Okay.
Which is kind of what we talked about. I'm not taking any medication that would hinder my ability to fly. That I'm not dealing with any stress. Haven't consumed alcohol within the last 8 hours. I'm not feeling the effect. No fatigue, and emotions/eating. So make sure that I'm not feeling any emotions that would hinder my ability to think properly or perform my functions, and that I'm not dealing with hunger.
All right. Okay, good. So just going through that before every flight. All right, great. So we're going to head out to the airplane now. I just want to see you pre-flight like you would normally pre-flight.
Mm-hmm.
I might ask you some questions while you do so, but just enjoy it, just like you would any other flight. When we get to the airplane as well, when I get there, I want you to show me those airworthiness documents that we talked about at the beginning that will be necessary for you to fly. And then I may ask you as well just to hear some V-speeds or some other things about the airplane before we fly. And so your oral testing now is complete. So congratulations. Their oral questioning will continue throughout the flight and throughout the rest of the test. But just really focus on flying. That's the main thing. You're flying. If you need me to repeat a question or if you need me to wait a couple minutes before you answer it because you're focusing on another task, that's completely fine. I'll understand. Your main task is flying and flying safely and showing me that you know how to do that. But I also will, so I'll have some questions for you. So let's head out to the plane.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for checking out Safety Pilot, watching our video on the Private Pilot mock check ride.
We're planning to have more resources out, such as a mock instrument check ride, mock commercial, and maybe even mock CFI.
If you are preparing for your check ride right now, be it any of the ones we just mentioned, be sure to check out our other videos. We'll have videos on CFI lessons, and those will apply for any check ride level. We'll also have videos on our check ride experiences, some gouges, and
just funny stories of things that happen. Check rides are a part of flying life, and it can be pretty interesting.
Yeah, we've got bloody nose stories, letting dogs out of car stories.
Yeah, that's some crazy things that happen.
Getting yelled at by the DPE stories. There's a lot to check out. So check out our other videos. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you learned a lot. And if you are on your way to becoming a private pilot, keep up the great work. It's a super rewarding thing, and we're so glad you checked out our video.
Fly safe.